Your heart just stopped. You have 7 seconds before everything goes dark. What happens next will shock you, but here's what nobody tells you. Your brain doesn't die when your heart stops. In fact, it goes into overdrive, and scientists have finally recorded what happens in those final moments. This is the complete timeline of death, and it's nothing like what you've been told. Death isn't a switch that flips off. It's a process, a cascade of events that happens in stages, each one more fascinating and terrifying tantalized. I'm going to walk you through every single second of what happens when a human dies, from the clinical perspective backed by actual research. Some of this will disturb you, but by the end, you'll understand one of science's deepest mysteries. Let's start at second 0. So what actually counts as death? Clinically, it's when your heart stops pumping blood. But here's the strange part. Your cells don't know you're dead yet. In fact, different parts of your body will die at completely different times. Your brain, it's got maybe 4 to 7 seconds before permanent damage begins. Your kidneys, they can last 30 minutes. Your skin cells, still alive 12 hours later. Death isn't a moment. It's a schedule. The moment your heart stops, a catastrophic chain reaction begins in your brain. Without fresh blood, oxygen stops reaching your brain cells, and your neurons, cells that make you, are the hungriest cells in your body. They consume 20% of your oxygen despite being only 2% of your body weight. At seconds, something incredible happens. Your brain releases a massive wave of electrical activity bigger than when you're awake, bigger than when you're dreaming. Scientists call it the death surge. In 2013, researchers at the University of Michigan measured this in rats. The dying brain produced the most intense, organized electrical activity they'd ever seen, more conscious than consciousness itself. Why? We don't fully know. Some scientists think it's the brain's last attempt to restart the heart. Others believe it's every neuron firing one final time, dumping all their stored memories and electrical charge before the darkness. And here is the disturbing part. If you've ever heard someone describe their life flashing before their eyes during a near-death experience, this might be why. That electrical surge could be replaying fragments of memories at hyperspeed. But at second 7, silence. Your brain's electrical activity is gone, but the story isn't over. At around 10 seconds, your brain starts drowning in its own chemicals, and one of them might explain the most common near-death experience in human history. Without oxygen, your brain cells die and release DMT, the most powerful psychedelic compound known to science, naturally produced in your brain, released in huge quantities when you die. In 2019, researchers at the University of Michigan proved that dying brains produce DMT in concentrations high enough to cause hallucinations. The tunnel of light, the feeling of peace, seeing deceased relatives. It might all be a DMT trip. At 20 seconds, another chemical floods in. Glutamate. This is your brain's on switch for neurons. But too much glutamate is toxic. It causes neurons to fire uncontrollably until they burn out. This is called Ex-2 toxicity. Your brain literally excites itself to death. By 30 seconds, your brain cells are swelling. The membranes that hold them together are breaking down. Ion pumps, the tiny machines that keep your neurons alive, are failing. And here's where it gets really dark. If someone restarted your heart right now, you'd probably survive with minimal brain damage. After this point, the damage becomes permanent. 1 minute without oxygen. This is the cliff, the outer layers of your brain, the cerebral cortex, where you think, remember, and feel starts dying. Neurons are collapsing by the millions. The damage is now irreversible. But here's something haunting. Your brain stem, the ancient reptilian part of your brain that controls breathing and heartbeat, is still trying to send signals. It doesn't know the heart isn't listening anymore, so it keeps firing commands into the void. Meanwhile, the rest of your body is starting its own slow shutdown. At 90 seconds, your muscles go completely limp. Cascade, primary flexidity. Any tension, any pose you were holding, it's gone. Your sphincter muscles relax. Yes, That means what you think it means. About 30% of people void their bowels or bladder at death. It's biology, not dignity. At 2 minutes, your skin is starting to change color. Without oxygen, the hemoglobin in your blood, the stuff that makes it red, turns dark purple. This is called livor mortis. And it starts pooling in whichever parts of your body are lowest. If you somehow came back after 5 minutes of death, you'd likely have severe, permanent brain damage. The person you were, your memories, personality, skills, much of it would be gone. But here's what's wild. Your individual cells are still alive. Your heart muscle cells can be restarted up to 30 minutes after death. Your kidney cells, still functioning 30 to 60 minutes later. Your skin cells won't die for hours. At 30 minutes, your body temperature starts dropping about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per hour. This is called algor mortis. Within 24 hours, you'll be room temperature. Between 1 and 3 hours, something strange happens. Rigor mortis begins. Your muscles start locking up, beginning with your eyelids and jaw, then spreading throughout your body. Why? When you're alive, your cells pump calcium out of your muscles. But after death, calcium floods in and locks your muscle fibers together. You become rigid, like us. This lasts about 48 hours before the muscles break down and you go limp again. So here's the question scientists are still arguing about. When do you actually die? Is it when your heart stops? When your brain activity ceases? When your brainstem dies? When the last of your neurons goes dark? Or when your cells finally give up? Some scientists argue that consciousness might persist in some form during that final electrical surge, meaning you might be aware for several seconds after clinical death. A 2014 study from the University of Southampton interviewed thousands of cardiac arrest survivors. About 40% reported some form of awareness during the time they were clinically dead. Some could even describe medical procedures being performed on them despite having no brain activity. We call these near-death experiences. But according to the science we just covered, they might be real. Your brain might be hyperactive, not inactive, in those first seconds of death. And here's where it gets really interesting. Scientists are now pushing the boundaries of death itself. In 2019, researchers at Yale revived pig brains 4 hours after death. Not full consciousness but cellular activity. In 2022, a similar technique worked on human brain tissue. People have been brought back from cardiac arrest after 40 minutes, 60 minutes, even 90 minutes in extreme cold water drowning cases, with minimal brain damage. So maybe the real question isn't what happens after you die, but how dead is dead. And with every year, science is redefining that line. So let's recap. In the first second after your heart stops, your brain launches a final electrical surge. At 7 seconds, you lose consciousness, possibly forever. At 10 to 30 seconds, your brain floods with psychedelic chemicals and begins dying. At 1 minute, permanent damage begins. And by 5 minutes, the person you were is most likely gone. Death isn't a moment, it's a cascade, a biological shutdown sequence that takes hours to complete. And in those first few seconds, your brain might experience something more intense than anything you felt while alive. The ancient Egyptians believed it took 3 days for the soul to leave the body. Modern science says it takes 48 hours for your last cells to die. Maybe they weren't so far off after all. Thanks for watching, Lumen. If you want to understand more about consciousness and the brain, check out our video on why your brain lies to you every day. And if you made it this far, I hope it's a long, long time before you experience any of this firsthand.